In fact, I'll tell you a story about that. You know, we stopped last year doing this. The last one was last year, but for many years I did 2 retreats a year. And at one of the people on the staff in the retreat is a very amazing composer and a musician and singer, Michael Stillwater. And at the end of the retreat, he kinds of leads some stuff where people are singing and doing some movement stuff and so on. And I thought something he was doing wasn't going the way he wanted to, and so I sort of yelled out a few instructions to people, and he sort of said, no, that's, and the way he said it was a little harsh, and for some reason it really triggered me. This was quite a few years ago now, because we were still doing retreats at Brighton Bush, which we outgrew after a while, Brighton Bush Hot Springs. But anyway, somehow it triggered some old thing in me, and I suddenly, it was sort of like some big authority figure chastising me, and I went into this very unresourceful state. And I felt so abused by it that I actually left. I mean, I've never done that where I was at a retreat. I mean,
you just walked out.
It was his session. I didn't need to be there particularly, but I left. This was like the culminating last few minutes of the retreat, too. So anyway, I went out, and it was, you know, we're at this place out in the middle of the woods, really, essentially, this lodge. And I went and I sat on this bench in the dark, and I'm sitting there feeling pissy and like a victim and all that. And I'm just sitting there in this crapola state. And there was this guy at the retreat who was kind of developmentally disabled a bit, not cognitively, you know, at the higher end or anything. Kind of a very simple sort of guy, a very sweet guy. And we had put on a little play earlier, and at one point he had missed a line. You know, I mean, these plays are chaos anyway, because we hardly rehearse them. They're part of the fun of them is that they're sort of a mess. But and he didn't, so I sort of, in this big stage whisper, gave him his line. And apparently it really embarrassed him. He felt like he'd really screwed it up, and he was assuming that I thought he'd made a mistake and that I was mad at him and all this stuff, which wasn't the case. Who cared? The whole thing was, every time we would do one of those, it would be chaos because nobody could remember their lines. And so anyway, I'm sitting in the dark, and he walks up to me and says, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And I could tell he was really, you know, sad and upset and everything. And I just said to myself, I can't be in this state anymore. I have to help this guy. And so he sat down next to me, and I just snapped out of that state instantly. And up to that point, I was really feeling terrible that this, in addition to feeling that being in this bad state, there was also this part of me that was saying, boy, I thought I was more together than this. But then after that happened, I was really glad that it had happened, because I realized that I could end it by choice at any point. I just, you know, was sort of...
And so him coming up to you was kind of the catalyst for...
Yeah, he came up to me, and I thought, well, I need to help this guy, because he misunderstood what happened earlier, and I don't want him to feel bad, and I want to help him. And so I just snapped out of it. Now, years before that, several years before that, I would not have been able to do that.
Right.
I would have, if I got angry or depressed or whatever it was, I could, you know, in some cases be in that state for days without being able to get out of it. So that's one of the things that happens as you use Holosync, is you get to the point where what was happening automatically, and you didn't seem to have any control, and it just seemed like it was just happening, you have choice over it. And I didn't even quite realize, I mean, that was almost like a reorganization at a higher level happening right there when I realized I have choice over this. And I, you know, and before I don't know if that was the exact moment when I started to have choice, but it was certainly a seminal moment for me. So at any rate, the whole idea here is to become more aware, which is what happens when you use Holosync, and as you become more aware, to watch what's happening. There's always something that you are unaware of, that you're caught in. In fact, Genpo Roshi often says, What you're not aware of is where you're stuck. One time I was with him, and he said to me, he did this big setup for this too, really sucked me in. He said, so I want you to tell me what your concept is, you know, tell me your description of how it all is, kind of as best as you can. You know, and so he said a lot more about it, but that was the essence of what he had asked. He probably took 3 or 4 minutes to describe what he wanted. So, you know, I sat there for a while and thought about what I was going to say, because I wanted to look good in front of the Zen master and everything. And so then I said something like, well, you know, everything is connected, and I started this sort of, you know, to say what a Zen person would say about all this kind of stuff. And then after I said it, very articulately, then he said, okay, doubt that. And because, you see, my assumption that that was the way it was, was a place where I was stuck. Because, first of all, there's no way you can really describe the way things are. So any description of it is, to some degree, bullshit. And the fact that I had, you know, sort of fallen into his trap and just tried to describe something that can't be described, you know,
that just drove the point home, didn't it?
Yeah, and so he was trying to, of course, make the point that whatever you think anything is, doubt it, because it isn't it. That's just your idea about it. But it was a place where I was unaware in that moment, you see, and he pointed it out to me, and I became aware of it, and because I became aware of it, it was a, you know, a real opening for me. So no matter what you are aware of, there's always something else that you're not aware of. There's always a higher level of meta to where you are. So, you know, the baby becomes aware that there's me and not me, and then it becomes aware that it has sensory abilities and the ability to move, and then it becomes aware that it has internal sensations, and then it becomes aware that it has thoughts, and then it becomes aware that it, you know, there's more things in this developmental ladder, and there's always more. And the whole idea is to become more aware and to direct that awareness, and to always be looking like, what am I unaware of? What is it that I haven't noticed? What am I caught in? What am I absorbed in? What am I taking for granted? That if I stepped back from it and watched it, some kind of shift would happen. Because every time you become aware of something that you were unaware of, it creates more choice, and that part of you that knows just what to do kind of begins to take over and do just what it needs to do. This is why the Genpo Roshis of the world seem to take resourceful action almost all the time, and they don't get themselves into all these messes, because the amount of whatever's going on that they're aware of is huge compared to the rest of the people. And that's why they're so skillful at getting people to be aware of the next thing. They're sort of like a mirror, and this is kind of my role too as a teacher, is I'm kind of a mirror to help you see what you're unaware of. Because as you see it and become aware of it, you then have choice about it in a way that you didn't have choice about it before. So anything else you can think of about this?
No, I think we covered it well. I'm excited to get on to actually the next principle too.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good one.